All right, welcome to another episode of The Real Ted G, and welcome to my podcast. So, hey, Mr. Bing.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm pretty good. You got any questions for me?
Yeah. So, how do you get a listing?
Oddly enough, I'm supposed to teach a class on listing presentation with my agents actually in just about an hour.
Oh, that's groovy.
How do you get a listing? You get a listing by either prospecting for the listing, going after all different ways of all different prospects, including knocking on doors to cold leads, maybe even making phone calls. Some people do that religiously and have amazing results. I mean, I've seen people, someone's referred to as a cold call king or the cold call queen. That's all they did in the beginning of their career. And I remember hearing at one point they had 366 closings in a single year. That's actually a closing every day, except 2 on one of the days. So that was all based on information that just cold calling. I myself, I like getting leads from my sphere of influence, which includes all the people that you already know and like, and hopefully like you back, friends, family members, etc., along with any past clients, anyone that I've sold or listed their home for sale, helped them find the right home for sale. That's sphere of influence. So I rely a lot on that. That happens once you're in the business for a few years and you actually have what's called book of business to go back on.
So I got to interrupt you real quick. So when it comes to knocking on doors, door knocking, right? I saw this TikTok video. Everyone I know, some people are going to roll their eyes when I say this, but there was a girl that was taking pictures for a listing, and there were cameras all over the place. It looked like a hoarder house. And she looks at this door upstairs and she's like, oh, can I, go in this one? And the guy was like, oh, if you go in there, I could kidnap you and no one will ever find you again. She's like, people know I'm here actually. And he's like, yeah, we'll see about that. And then she bolted out the door. There is a TikTok video. I will send it to you. But how do agents stay safe in situations where they're entering people's homes like that?
We teach them to stay safe. For instance, if you go to a home and if you have a creepy feeling, you should get out of there. But let's pretend you don't have a creepy feeling and you go to a home and you say, first of all, when you're prospecting, you're doing something. You're actually there for a reason. You're there to obtain a lead. Okay. So when you're knocking on a door and you say, oh, hi, Mr. Homeowner, I was hoping you could help me out. We actually have a shortage of inventory right now, and we have buyers that would kill to live in this neighborhood. Have you given any thought to selling? Let's pretend that's a script that an agent's following. And if the person says, yes, actually, I have. Why don't you come on in? Well, if you're stupid, go ahead and go right in. We teach our agents not to be stupid and to be professional.
Okay.
And definitely always answer the phone. So one of the ways you're going to do that, and you're going to accomplish both things at once, you are going to say, oh, thank you, but let me tell you how I do business. I'm actually here. I'm actually going to speak to a few of the neighbors, and that's my goal for this afternoon. I would love to do a little research and set up an appointment. When is a good day and time for me to come back and maybe sit down and go over what the market's doing? Also go over real numbers with what's going on in your neighborhood regarding sales prices, under contract prices, and activity levels. And that way we can make informed decisions together. And that way you make an appointment. The safety end of it is a person is not going to take too many liberties now, because guess what? When you do go back, you have a bona fide appointment at an address. I hate to say it this way, but at least we have a record of where to find the body. At the very least, they would be hesitant. So, and then again, sometimes it's perfectly innocent. Maybe the person just says, "Oh, I'd love for you to see my house." So if depending on your personality, I think that you should always err on the side of caution and say, "No, this is how I do business. I take my business seriously, and I have a structure and a protocol that I follow. So I want to do a little research before I just come in and just blurt out an opinion about pricing or the activity. So let me go and then let's make a real appointment to sit down." That would be one way to safeguard for an agent's safety.
That's awesome.
The other thing would be to call someone and go with you.
Yeah. Oh, yep. Absolutely. Or if you live in a one of the cooler states, you get some protection. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that's really cool that you guys are you guys teach that, because that was something that never occurred to me. Was like, oh wow, you're actually entering a strange person's home
All the time. I do have an actual class on safety first.
Wow.
That would be one of the tips, especially when you're knocking on strangers' doors. The other thing is that we teach our agents, when you're in a vacant house and you're about to, let's pretend, enter the basement to show the home, you should never enter it first. You allow the buyer or the person you're showing the home to enter the basement, and you follow them down. This way, just in case they decide to just let you enter the basement and they lock the door behind you, and then they can, obviously,
do what they wish.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. So we go through a whole checklist of the do's and don'ts for safety first, and there's a lot of them to be aware of. I've had agents, call me and say, I'm about to go into this person's house. Call me in 5 minutes. And I'll answer. And they absolutely, then it's a perfect excuse to answer. You're going to a stranger's home and you say, this is my manager on the phone. Let me just get this. Now that's, if you have, this should be a secret word. And if you have a creepy feeling and you say the secret word, then I'm obviously going to drive to that house and, knock on the door and say, I need her. Her kids are on the phone. I can't, I'm having a hard time reaching her. So we make up an excuse. We don't want to make the potential seller or client feel uncomfortable either, because maybe it's perfectly innocent. But if you have a creepy feeling, your gut almost never lies to you.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. Your gut's pretty honest with you most of the time. And that's awesome. I didn't know there was like a whole safety apparatus that y'all did.
Yeah, the only thing more honest than my gut is the camera.
Hey, even that. Listen, sometimes with AI and the way that these new filters are doing, man. Ooh, I don't know.
Mr. Bing.
Yes.
I've never used a filter.
No, really. I don't use them either. But
yeah.
I've seen a lot of people use filters, and it creates such a negative perception. I mean, you could even use it for houses. I mean, you could edit photos. Like, I'm sure there's buyers that have edited photos or have used camera angles to make the home look more appealing than it would be. And that's that's an interesting conundrum. Like, how do you guys deal with the age of Photoshop in real estate?
Well, in the age of Photoshop, once I went to a house to show it to my buyer, and it has a beautiful picture of the outside on the listing online, and it has this gorgeous green lawn and typical 2-story home. And we drive to the house, and the buyer's looking at the house, and they're like, Ted, what happened? I said, oh no, we've been robbed. They stole the lawn. Obviously, the lawn was superimposed, photoshopped in.
Oh my God!
Things like that can happen.
Photoshopped in.
Yeah.
Wow.
People do virtual staging. Sometimes the house calls for it, and it can be a really useful tool. And sometimes, maybe some people feel that it's a cheat.
Wow. Yeah, I listen, I would feel that way too. I'd want to know if it's a house that looks really good or really bad. I want to know what I'm walking into.
Well, in our industry here on Long Island and New York in itself, and according to our MLS rules and guidelines, we are supposed to disclose when a photo has been photoshopped or enhanced or virtual staging has occurred. So it should all be disclosed.
I agree with you. It absolutely should be. Now, when you talk about, you were saying something interesting about cold calling. So, I know that for certain industries, you can't cold call. Like, for example, in the life insurance industry, you cannot cold call an individual. But cold calling businesses is acceptable. So, what are the rules for real estate? How come you guys can call homeowners through cold calling?
Well, I believe that the rules that govern against cold calling have to do with selling a product, and we in fact actually don't sell a product. We actually are here to provide a service. So that's one of the ways that you should look at real estate, and it's not the same as just cold calling and soliciting. We are here to provide a service. A lot of times a lot of my agents are actually, whether it's cold calling, calling a neighborhood, or reaching out door to door, door knocking. A lot of times the agent actually is probably working with a buyer who needs to find a house, and one of the things we actually, we go to the neighbors of a recently sold house or a recently listed home, letting them know we have more buyers, or we have a specific buyer that's looking in your specific neighborhood. Have you given any thought to selling? So when you're doing it that way, I don't believe the same cold call and soliciting restrictions apply, because we are there to provide a service. In fact, for a buyer, we're actually providing a service to them.
Interesting. Oh, that's cool. So I guess that makes sense because the service isn't a product. Now, there's something that you wrote down here. What was I going to say? Something you wrote down here on our handy dandy notebook. And you wrote down the phrase, making it look easy. So what do you mean by that in regards to your profession?
Oh, technically an ad line that I used a long time ago, and my tagline was, obviously there was a nice picture of me, because if there's one thing I know how to do, it's take a good picture. And the subheading on that picture was, I only make it look easy. The truth is, real estate is not easy. In fact, real estate, my parents had a diner, so it might not be the hardest thing I've ever done in terms of careers. Real estate is not easy. Making it look easy, now that's an art. So I try. I'm nothing if not an entertainer. So I like to believe that we're all artists in our own way. So making it look easy, or making any industry or any career look easy, is definitely borderlines art. So I try to make it look easy. No, I don't. I don't call my clients and say I've been working this many hours to get this done, and get this done, and this deadline, and this was met, and this was done, and that wasn't done. No, they don't get to see any of that. They get to see the nice brochure. They get to see the crowd of people showing up to their open houses. They get to see the end product, and they're the client. That's exactly what should happen. They pay for a service, and I try to provide really good service.
So what did you mean by hold my beer? Does that kind of feed into that?
Oh, we're going to get into that on a different podcast.
That's a whole other subject.
That subject details market shifts and changes, and you think you have it tough, that kind of story. And again, it's not complaining, it's growth. But that's definitely a story for another time. I do an impression of agents and everything in it.
Cool. All right, so what's this about know your numbers?
Know your numbers. Oof. There's numbers when it comes to knowing your market. When I know my market, when I know the average sales price of a home in a specific town is $496,000, or is it $796,000, or if I know that the median sales price of a home jumped to 10% higher than it was this time last year. When I know that information, that tells me how I can explain to my seller, wait, this is what it means. So knowing your numbers and explaining your numbers and explaining the benefit to your seller are two different things. But when it comes to being a real estate agent, a professional, you should know your numbers. Know your average sales price. Know what the median sales price is, and know if the median sales price has been pushed higher or lower, and know what that means. But more importantly, there's other numbers that an agent should know. There's numbers that we should know for ourselves. I should know, and I do, how many people I have to talk to before I get what's called a lead, or how many leads I have to follow up on before I get what's called a bona fide listing appointment or a buyer appointment. And I should know how many buyer appointments, or how many listing appointments, more importantly, do I have to go on in order to obtain one. If your ratio is 100%, that means if you go on 2 listing appointments and you get both of them, you're great. You're amazing. Okay. That's 100% return. And by knowing that, I can figure out if I want to spend money on a boat next year and I need X dollars, I can narrow it down, and my agents, I will sit down with them and help them. We can narrow it down to exactly how many more people you have to talk to in order to garner that higher salary, higher or that higher profit margin, whatever you need to do. So That's just called knowing your numbers. And by the way, you don't have to be good at math to do it, because I'm not really good at math.
Neither am I, man. I can't even add. But when it comes to, so there's like a whole formula to achieving financial goals within this. You just have to follow it.
True.
Excellent. Wow, that's awesome. So when it comes to, commercial properties, right? So something that I would like to do in the near future is open a podcast studio. How do you, instead of, now I know home buying is one thing, but how would you help someone like me or another business owner find an appropriate space to run their business out of?
Well, when it comes to commercial property, it's a different animal, and I'm fairly well versed. When it comes to a situation for a buyer for commercial property, we have to look at, what are we looking to buy? Are we looking to buy something that already has income? Because you're going to become your own tenant. Now, that's where it's really interesting. There's tax repercussions that happen when you're leasing a building, which obviously you can write off the entire lease. So maybe it makes more sense to lease a building or space, commercial space. So that has to do with the individual. So the rules of renting versus buying change on commercial properties. If you can buy something and you also have additional rent roll, I would recommend that. If you're looking for a podcast studio, which is going to occupy, 1,000 square feet, maybe 1,500 square feet. If you're your own best tenant, that's great. But when it comes to business, you have to take that into account.
Interesting. So the whole game really changes with commercial.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
I didn't start doing a lot of commercial until about 10 years ago. So I got the residential side of it down pat. I feel you should learn
you should learn residential before you learn commercial.
No, you should at least learn one thing.
Okay.
You can't chase too many squirrels. And there's an old phrase, I think Zig Ziglar says it, you'll never catch a rabbit if you chase two.
That's good advice. And I agree with that as well. I mean, you got to find something to focus in and then, expand after you find one thing that you're good in. I definitely, so with a new agent then, would you recommend they start with residential or just pick one area and focus on that?
I would probably say you should always pick one area, focus on it, get what I call, or an author of a book, Malcolm Gladwell, calls your 10,000 hours. Get to the point where you can make it look easy, and then add to your business. So yes, but it should be something that interests you. So if commercial real estate interests you more, then start there.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, because if I was a real estate agent, I feel like I would focus more on commercial, just because I personally feel like there's more people looking to buy business property than there is residential property. I don't know if that's factually true.
That all depends on the way the pendulum's swinging in the market. When we have low interest rates on residential mortgages and buyers are coming out of the woodwork and things are flying off the shelf and there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of sales made in the residential side, you'll find that the commercial deals or the commercial side of it slows down a bit. I can always tell if the market is adjusting or the type of market we're stepping into, if I'm getting more phone calls on the commercial side of things versus the residential side of things.
So if we're getting more focus on the commercial side of this, so if you're getting more phone calls about commercial, what does that signal to you?
It signals to me that the residential side is slowing down. We could be in tune for, we're getting set for maybe a slight transitioning market, which brings with it even more opportunities. And possibly the market could be changing. We might be slowly adjusting from a seller's market into a buyer's market. But these last 3-4 years have been nothing we've ever seen. So our next adjustment or our next transition, if we do go to a buyer's market, I'm sure it's going to be really interesting and possibly like no other buyer market or slightly adjusted market we've ever seen.
So what do you think that means for the American people moving forward into this next stage?
Oh, I think that across the board, most analysts predict, and most analysts have done surveys that still prove that the American dream still holds true, to own a home. There is no better way to build wealth And there's no better way to build community than home ownership.
Excellent.
So there's always going to be a market.
Well, before we go, why don't you tell them where you could find our podcast? Because now it's on Spotify and it's on every other platform.
Oh, so we've finally platformed. Great. So you can find this podcast as well as others that with similar topics on the Real Ted G podcast. And I hope to grow the viewership. And you can always find me and you can hang out with me to keep it real.